Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to Swahili Media Network. And today we continue with our series, which this is the continuation of what we've been doing last week. And last week, I believe all of you can remember that our coverage was related to gang life, and we focus more about how to help people who would like to come out of the gang life. In short, we also discussed in details matters related to issues such as carrying knife, the use of knife, and consequences of knife. Today, before I go into the topic, we have some few very, very special guests. We have, and I should say we are very lucky because these people have some massive experience in relation to these issues. They've been working with youth. They've gone through life, and they understand a lot in relation to what we are discussing. So we have, as usual, Omar Hussein, our co-host. We have Brother Abdurrahman there, who was with us last week as well, and we are very glad he's still with us. We have Brother Yusuf, who was with us also last week, but Brother Bingi here, he's appearing in the channel for the first time, and we warmly welcome him. So, without wasting time, we will start our session, and today we are going to focus more about the life in the gang still, but more of the side of the consequences of getting involved in gang life. Uh, and as I said, we have people with experience. So to begin with, I would like to give every one of us 1 minute or so. Especially, we'll start with Mr. Bingi here to introduce himself, and then we'll continue with our session. Mr. Bingi, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm being invited to be part of this platform where I can share my experience, my knowledge, and my understanding of gang and violence and all. I don't know if Simeon has told you, but I'm actually Simeon's father. And don't tell me that I don't look old enough, but I am. You know? And Simeon invited me onto this platform to share my experience and my knowledge and understanding of gangs and violence. So anything that I can share of my personal experiences and other experiences. I've not too long come out of the prison system. I've just spent 5 years, 3 months in prison out of a 10-year sentence, which was gang related and other offenses. So I can share my knowledge of that as we go along. And I know it's a case where I'm willing to be a participant in this platform anytime I'm asked. So, and that's me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for accepting to share your knowledge and your experience with us. So let's get started straight. The first question, which is kind of general, what is your advice to the youngsters who who are now living that life, being involved in the gangs? What would be the first thing you would tell them?
Well, if I can explain a little bit of my background, like I said, last year I came out of spending a 10-year sentence in prison. And while I was inside, I was inside there for 5 year, 3 months. And out of that 5 years, I spent 4 years mentoring other prisoners who was involved in gangs and violence of some kind of shape or form. And it's kind of it's kind of it's kind of a wide variety of subject when you're saying what do you advise people who are involved in gangs, because some I've spoken to some people who say that they're not actually a gang member, they're just part of a group who basically do things together, which had led to them being in crime. And from my experience point of view, I personally didn't call myself a gang member. I didn't say that I was part of a gang, even though the authorities may label you, because the dictionary definition of a gang is two or more people who are in a group, whether it's a good gang or a bad gang. So my advice, I always say to people when I'm mentoring youngsters who are involved in gangs is to try to ask them the biggest question of all: why are they involved in gang? Why are they a part of a gang? And what is the attraction of being in a gang? And then when you get the answer and the reply to that question, then you can try to advise them about the consequences. Because I'm straightforward, I'm blunt. I always tell the youths who are involved in gangs and violence is there's only one of three things that can happen. And sometimes in all cases, all three. It's either you end up in prison, you end up with serious injury, or you end up dead. There are the three consequences that can happen when you're involved in gangs. In some cases, some people are lucky enough that they just end up with a serious injury and end up in prison and they don't die. Some people end up are free. They go to prison, they get serious injury, and they die from that injury. So my advice to people is to sit down and to think about the consequences. Because most people involved in crime or gangs or violence, they don't think of the consequences. Because to every action there's a reaction. So the consequences to of being involved in gangs is one of three things, like I said. So it's for the person involved in that gang to realize the consequences, and then you can try to advise them if they are looking at advice. Because me and you, we can talk to some of these gang members until we're blue in the face. If they do not want to change or they do not want to change their mindset, it doesn't make a difference what I tell them or what I advise them. They're never going to change.
Thank you very much. Maybe I should also welcome Brother Abdurrahman on the same on the same question. What would be your advice on your side for the youngsters who are living this life and maybe they think it's a quick way to get money, maybe involved in drugs? What would be your first advice to such youngsters who are only seeing the little benefits without being very considerate of the consequences, such as those which were mentioned, being seriously injured or ending up dying or ending up in prison? So they tend to not think to contemplate deeply in terms of such consequences. So what would you say to such people who think it's only one side of the story? I only see the benefits of being in the gang.
This is the reason why I invited somebody who has actually been part of the consequence of, like they said, being in a gang or being involved in criminal activity. Because you don't, when you're there, you just see the glitz and the glamour of it. You see the fact that you have protection, you see the glory. You may be selling drugs or whatever, and you have money. But then at the end of it, when you hit one of those consequences, the reality of it is what my dad will be able to speak about, is that it's prison, serious injury, or death. So it's very hard to advise a young person who doesn't want to be advised and who doesn't want to change, because like we mentioned last week, a lot of it is glorified through the social media, through the platforms that they're involved in, and just through even the area that they're in. I mean, just sadly, just 2 days ago, I think it was, in not far from where my business place is, and where thing is, somebody was stabbed. Now we don't know the reason why this, and he actually died as well. So we don't know the reasons why as yet. But these are the things that I would show young people, or tell young people, is that, look, in your area, this is how much people have died. This is how much innocent people have lost their lives, and these are the consequences of it. So I would always try and show live examples of what is going on in their community, and that try to show them that they're not far away from it, and they're not too big to be affected by what is going on in the area. But it's very hard to just like pinpoint and finger exactly what you would say to a youth, because you'd have to know the isolated situation as well. But it's similar to what my dad had mentioned. It's just the consequences of the actions and what those consequences are.
Thank you very much. Before we dig deep into the details of the consequences, we have Brother Yusuf who is a young. Let me explain one thing. We are Swahili speaking community, and I'm glad we are getting the help from our brothers from the Caribbean side. But the problem with our community, I myself, for example, I'm first generation. I'm the one who migrated into this country. And majority of us are like me. We are the first generation. And then our children are second generation who are born into this environment, this country. The problem we are facing right now is that we grew up in a completely different environment, mostly in African countries, be it Burundi, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Somalia, or wherever, Congo, and so on. But to us, is like we did not grew up in this environment, and therefore sometimes it is quite difficult to see things very early. It's quite difficult to understand how things are changing. And I mean, for example, if a youngster has started to change and started to get involved in gang life and so on, we tend to see it very late. By the time we realize maybe some of our own children are involved in that kind of lifestyle, it tends to be very, very late. So maybe the question I would like to pose to everyone here in the studio, but we will start with Yusuf, who is himself a second generation, a Swahili speaker, second generation. Why? How do we get to know that this youngster now is not going to? I mean, he's being involved in such things. What are the signs? What are the early signs?
Assalamu alaikum. And that's a very good question, but and it's a very difficult answer to answer, because you cannot tell. Me being obviously second generation and being Swahili, you cannot tell, because the way that we are raised, and there's certain things that you do keep from your parents. There's certain things that growing up that I did keep away from my parents. But when it comes to the consequences, like a short story that I would give for my example, when I first got arrested for doing a crime, and then the very next week I got arrested again for doing a similar crime again. That's when I ended up and I said, stop. Because that's very difficult for parents, especially being in Swahili community, is our parents growing up, they don't really have much time, because as we touched on last week, they're always working, mom's always cooking, they always have plans to provide, where sometimes you do get that free time where you can easily get influenced. But my turnaround is when I got caught twice in 1 week. That's when I decided to be much more careful, and I decided I am not going to do this, because at the end of the day, growing up Swahili, I did not want anything to get back to my parents. That was my biggest fear. And as soon as it did, I didn't want to disappoint them. And when it did, that's when I started to change my life around. If to say you want to catch it early or to avoid it is, like we said yesterday, it's more time, spending time with your children. So, for instance, I know what I did when I was young. I've got 2 daughters right now, alhamdulillah. When they grow up, I will be sure, especially in the teen years, the pinnacle years where they're easily influenced, that I am going to be much more involved in their lives. Like, they're going to spend more time with me, more time than being outside. And even if they go outside, it's always making sure that there's an adult present. There's someone that's always there looking and watching and making sure they don't get themselves into certain predicaments that they shouldn't be. And also, my father always spoke to me about issues that are about the world. He always would tell me, even though I found it boring, and my uncle always constantly talk to me. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. If you do this, this is going to happen. And even sometimes it would result to me getting a few smacks here and there, but it was just a constant, um, always on my case, where it's almost like, okay, I'm not supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do this, I'm not supposed to do this. But I feel as if you give children enough room and if you don't pay attention as a parent, and they will easily get influenced when they go outside. I remember being in Leicester and the only place we can play at was outside Uncle Omar's door. So he will be in the house, he can look outside. There's a clear view of what we're doing, and more time we'll be playing football. It wouldn't be he would lose attention, or and then we would wander off. And even if we would wander off, is where you going to? Oh, you're going to the shop down the road. That's too far. You can't go. So it's more of a. I feel it's not surveillance, but I think it's just keeping an eye on the new generation or keeping the eye on kids and always knowing what they're getting up to, knowing what they're doing, and following up where they're going and following up what they're doing as well. That's how you can avoid them from stepping outside, if that answered the question.
Thank you. That speaks a lot. Thank you very much. Maybe we've all agreed that the consequences of being involved in such lifestyle is prison or death or even severe injuries. Now, why these people keep doing these things knowingly? I believe they themselves, they understand that there is a risk involved in doing what they're doing. So the question is, why? Is it that there is so much benefits in that lifestyle, or is it that these people tend to be slightly delusional and they don't think carefully about the consequences of their action? So I will leave this question open to anyone who would like to chip in, please.
I would like to say the way I see it is there's so many factors to why. There's so many factors. There's the factor of poverty. Someone might get into this lifestyle for to support their family and to earn some money. There's a factor of following someone that's insecure or someone that doesn't have an identity and they feel welcomed in this lifestyle. And then there's a factor of the thrill. Some people are in it just for the thrill, that the glory of not getting caught, the glory of trying to get away with it. That's the most dangerous one of all of them. And then there's a factor of peer pressure where someone doesn't want to be involved, but peer pressure and friends and not seeming that they're going to be cool or seeming like it's a betrayal and loyalty. That's another factor. So the why is there is so many factors as to why someone does it. But what brother Abdul Rahman just said, there's some people that even if you tell them they're in it for the thrill, they're in it for the lifestyle of not getting caught, the excitement, and that's just the dopamine that they have, where it's almost as if it's an addiction. But from other people, others, it's almost like they, no, not to say they don't have a choice, but they have to, sometimes you have to go through something to realize that this is not the life that you're trying to live. Sometimes you have to face those consequences, yeah, that to make you wake up and say, okay, I'm going to take a different path. So there's so many reasons as to why.
Thank you. To our viewers and maybe listeners, please, if you want to join this discussion, there's a link in the comment section. You can click that link and join us either as a listener, or if you want to ask a question, or you can also ask a question via in the comment section, and someone will read out your comment or answer your question while we keep going with our session. Let's change our focus now into life in prison. But before we get into that, I would like to leave it to my co-host if he has any question to ask in the first part of our discussion. Omar, please.
Thank you. Actually, so far you are doing really well, and the question has been answered accordingly. Rather being explained very well, the reason and the consequences of that lifestyle. But to me, to add up on the question you've raised, last question, which Yusuf tried to answer it, is As you mentioned at the beginning, Manny, that we are the first generation of East African, especially from Tanzania or Zanzibar. And Yusuf elaborate a bit more, saying that the parents, they don't have time with their kids. And that's true. I do agree with him, because if you look at us when we coming in here, the thing, we didn't have enough families, and our thing was like, we have to live according the life of the people who we met them here. If they were in the gang, then we are trying to associate with them to do things maybe they were not right things, and we were thinking by then that it was right for us. Unfortunately or fortunately, once when we've got married and we've got our kids, we wanted to change, but do we have a time with our kids? We don't have much time for our kids, because what we wanted to do, we have to spend a lot of time to fulfill our duties to the family. So you working long hours, you have to work maybe more than one job or two jobs just to make sure the family are getting a proper life. So based on that, we've just realized we don't have much time with our youngsters or with our kids. So the kids, when they are coming home, maybe they find their mama is there, but then they are going out. Who they are going to hang out, or who they are going out to hang out with, we don't know. So it sounds like we as the parents, we didn't have much time to spend with our kids, and based on that, that's why they've decided to see that there is an opportunity to earn some quick money, and how they have to earn that some quick money is just to join them with the gangs, and you end up finding the kids are joining to the gangs which are not good for their lives. Also, they are making a big impact in our families. So, and for the first part of that, me, I do agree that as a parent, we should have more time with our kids, just to try to educate them the impact. Actually, today, that's why we're gonna love how we have to make our kids not to join with the gang. Also, we're gonna learn the consequences of being in the gang. Because Bringy said that there is a three things: you might gonna end up in jail, you might gonna get stabbed, and get maybe disability, and some of them they are losing their life. So as a parent, we have to learn from them, because we have people who got an experience on that, and then our youngsters as well. Actually, we have to make sure that maybe this is a platform they have to join to get to learn so many things through the experience of the people who just went through with that situation. So that's is it.
And can I just add, if you don't mind, can I just say something as well?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Which I want to just highlight that what we have to try to refrain from doing is generalizing and stereotyping a situation, because I don't think we can ever put our finger on a button and say why people are involved in gang and violence. It can be widespread situations, and I think it's is it Yusuf, brother Yusuf? He touched upon some great points of whether it's poverty, whether it's the attraction, whether it's peer pressure, and there's many other reasons why people can get involving in gangs. And this is why in my mentoring, I've learned that you deal with everyone as an individual. You don't try to pocket them and say just because you're a gang member. You got to find out, because there's one thing that you've some people fail to look in, is a thing what they call ACE, which is adverse child's experiences, which is all to do with trauma. And when people go through certain trauma in life, they react to a situation to that trauma by doing certain things, which is not directly something that they can control doing, because trauma affects people in different ways, shapes, and forms. And many people who are part of gangs and violence, if you ever check them out, their past, you will find out that they've experienced some kind of personal trauma, and this is part of the problem. So sometimes you've got to try to get to the root cause of why you are involved in certain things, why your actions is not correct, and then that's where you do it. And then it's always down to the mindset. If somebody's willing to change their thinking of their actions, then that's always a good start. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Bingi, for your addition, and I think it's very valuable. Now let's move on our discussion to. I believe this will be our main discussion from now onwards to the end of our session, and I would like to title it as the actual life in prison, because we believe these people who are being involved in gangs, they belittle some of these consequences, especially life in prison, and thinking that, okay, I will go there and serve my term, be it 2, 3, 4, whatever number of years, and then come out even stronger. Some of people would think like that. So let me start with Brother Bingi again. How would you explain briefly, to begin with, life in prison?
Well, if I can say that prison over the years has changed, and regardless what anybody says about prison, prison is not an easy place to go to. And then there again, it's down to the mindset of the person, because you will find that people, some people who go to prison on a regular basis, it doesn't really affect them, because their mindset is completely on a level where prison doesn't really affect them. And most people who think like that, they do not have a family. They do not have somebody to who they love and who loves them, and they don't really have much outside. Prison is a mind state. So if you end up in a situation where you're locked up and you're being told what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and yes, you can get used to that, but nobody gets used to losing their freedom. Nobody gets used to being away from your son, your daughter, your wife, your girlfriend, your mother. And the biggest effect from my personal experience is when you know that there's issues outside where you cannot do nothing to contribute to, and you're helpless, and then you just feel like you're worthless, because you're in a situation where you start to reflect upon the situation and saying, well, if I was on the outside, I would be able to help a situation, or help whatever situation it is. So prison on the old, I know that some people glamorize prison, but nobody talks about when they're in the cell by themselves and they're all in their head and they're crying, because nobody doesn't share that with their friends and their family. Because a high percentage of people who go to prison, they will not tell you the 100% truth of the trauma that they're going through in there, the problems that they're having, the issues that they're having, and not being able to sleep at night, or whatever the case may be. So prison, again, is very subjective of whether prison helps people or it doesn't help. Now, from my personal experience, I've been to prison 3 times. So some people would say, well, the first time I went to prison, I was 28 years old for a very violent offense, which was a shooting. And being put in the position that I was in at that time, I would say now, if I was put in that position as again, I probably would end up in prison, because I counted that at that particular time as self-defense. And regardless of who you are, somebody can always be put in a position where you can end up in prison. Even the most straightest person would never be involved in the police. You could be in your house, you're in your bed, somebody breaks into your house, you come downstairs, you get in a tuffle, you end up damaging or stabbing that person, or damaging that person, you can end up in a prison. You can be driving a car, somebody steps out in front of you, bam, you run them over, you get into trouble for reckless driving, you end up in prison. So it's not everybody who goes to prison who is a bad person. They've just made bad choices. So when you're in prison, this is when your mindset, you've got at some stage, this particular time with me, with my first sentence, my mindset was, am I willing to work with what I call the system, the authorities? On the previous 2 sentences, I was not willing to work with them, because as far as I'm concerned, I thought that they was part of my problem while I was in prison in the first place. On this particular time, my mindset looked at it much different. So I was willing now, when I was approached, to use my experience to help others. So that is what encouraged me to spend my time in prison constructively, by helping others. Overall, I would say that most people on the out think that prison is easy, because you might be able to have an Xbox, you can have music, you don't eat good food, but sometimes people might make it look like that you get good food. Your nutrition is not correct. You're not getting the right amount of food to eat. Yes, you can go to the gym and you can frequent the gym, but most people, when they come out of prison, regarding how big and thick and tough they look, if they was to get a overall check, there would be something wrong, whether it be physical or mental with you. So prison does do some harm to anyone who goes to prison. Even though I've been out what nearly 6 months, and there's certain things that I've got to get used to because I have to spend 5 years in prison. Even the simplest things like your tap, the water tap. In prison, you press your water tap, so automatically the water tap comes off. When you come out of prison, you turn on the tap and I forget to turn it off, where I've nearly flooded out my house 2 times because of that. So there's a lot of things that you have to adapt to when you come out of prison. So overall, what I wanted to get across to people, that prison is not a nice place, it's not a good place, it's not a positive place, but at the same time, you can go to prison and make the right decision not to return there.
Thank you very much for such a very wonderful contribution. We'll continue with our session. Please, again, to our listeners or viewers, you can join us by clicking the link on the comment section. Before we continue, there are a few comments here I would like to read by Mahmoud Hussein. He says, Assalamu alaikum. I want to add that we have to be friends with them, meaning our children. He was talking about our discussion when we were talking how do our children get to be involved in games. So he said we have to be friends with them, and by now what they like and support them, by knowing what they like and support them. He continued by saying, for example, my son likes playing football, so I make sure I'm there to watch him. And I have 2 girls. I go with them playing indoors golf, so we have more time and fun together. I think, brother Mahmoud, what he meant is he get to be connected with his children and be very close, and therefore they tend to work together in such activities such as sports and so on, which is, I think, it's a quite valuable addition to our discussion. Now let's move on. Brother Abdurrahman, back to you. We have got some insight about, just general insight about life in prison and how hard it can be for an individual. But I would like to know for family who have someone who has been imprisoned, how does it leave the family? What are the effects to the family behind, not the person himself, to the family behind?
First of all, I want to say there's 2 things I want to say here. Number one is what having somebody who has been to prison does is it makes you not want to go. So although in my time growing up, I wasn't always perfect, I didn't always do the right things, but I was scared of going to prison. The reason why I was scared of going to prison is because of the fact that my father had spent so much time in prison, and it was time that I missed out with my father. So growing up, I always had the mindset that I don't want to do something that can put me in the position, whereas if I have children, I'm not going to be able to have that time to spend with them. But the way you can turn something negative into something positive is that changed my mindset. So my dad making those mistakes made me think to myself, I don't want to make those mistakes because I want that freedom. I want to be able to have that time spent outside, and there's so much things that you can be doing. It's kind of like time wasted. So you can also turn something that is negative into something positive by being part of it as well, of somebody who's been the family member of somebody who is in prison. Secondly, it is very tough. It's very tough as somebody who's had somebody who's spent a long periods of time in prison, because a lot of the time I'm the eldest son, So a lot of the responsibilities, a lot of the things you feel as though you need to step up and you need to you need to burden those things. So it does have an effect on everybody, and this is one of the things of the consequences of it. If you wanted to deter somebody from going, you'd say, well, what about your mother? What about your father? What about your siblings? What about your wife? What about your children? How do you think they're gonna feel if you go to prison? So kind of like taking it away from them. So you might be okay with it. The individual, the youth, they might be okay with it. But what about your family members? What about your mum? How do you think you will feel? How do you think they're gonna feel with you being away from them when you could have been with them because of the choices you've made to commit a crime or whatever it may be? Think about how they would feel. So it's always good. It's always good question to ask the young person that, yeah, you might be fine going to prison, but what about, how do you think that will affect the people who are your loved ones and who are involved in your life? And for me, there's positives and there was negatives. The positive being that I said I never wanted to go there, and the negatives are that you are away from, that person's away from you, and the input that they could have in your life and spending time with, I've got a child that my dad didn't even see until he came out, like she's 4 or 5 years old. So those kind of things a lot of people miss out on, and like you said, could these be effects of trauma, not having that person around? Could that affect me? Could that affect my children? Could that affect your mother or your, what's it called, whoever it may be? There's a role on effect to the consequences of your actions. So yeah, I hope that kind of like answers your questions. But it does have a lot. It does have a big burden and a big effect on the families as well.
Thank you for your contribution. I would like to share a very short story in relation to life in prison. I myself have experience, although it's not going to be a full story, but it's going to be my personal experience. A couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half or so, a member of our community passed away, a woman, and her own son at the time she passed away was in prison. So when we went for burial, they brought her son in handcuffs, and the experience, what I've seen there, was extremely traumatizing, because this kid, when he was brought, he's about 18, 19 years old kid, but when he came to bury her own mother, he was crying so much, and all he was saying is, I am so sorry, mother. I am so sorry, mother. He kept on repeating, saying that while he was crying. We didn't know why he was apologizing to his mother, but he felt something. He felt so guilty. We didn't know what it was. So I just wanted to share that part of story which I experienced myself when we were burying one of our own members. So I'm quite sure there's a lesson in that, even though the story is incomplete. Maybe we would like to know why he was apologizing. What did he do wrong to his own mother? We don't know that, but the fact that he was apologizing, it tells something. It was not good. Let's continue. We know that some of the life in prison, it's like you have limited personal autonomy. Individual have very limited autonomy. They are subject to rules and restriction. It's not like life outside the prison. There is social isolation in prison, and limited opportunity to interact with the friends of your choice who are not in prison at the time. So it's quite difficult, we believe. So maybe I would like to pose this to anyone who would like to chip in and answer. What is the mental side? How does it affect a person to live like that for 2, 3, 4 years or even longer? How is it going to affect your mental health?
Me, just to add on to that, I haven't been to prison, but I know friends who have, and I know people who went and have come out. And like Brother Bingi said, from their experience, what they told me, and it's almost their advice to me is, oh, if you ever do manage to go there, one thing Brother Bingi said, it is the mindset. And they did speak about the lifestyle in there, the utilities, and you have to make do of what you got. And sometimes it's taking a negative situation and turning it into a positive, and also how it humbled them to appreciate things on the outside and appreciate the life that they did have before going in, and also motivated them to do better and do courses while they were in there studying, and actually came out and actually managed to do much better when they came out, more than people who have had their freedom, because of the mindset and what the humbleness that they went in, that they got humbled in a sense of, this, I don't want to live like this because I can't do much over here, and it's not a luxury. So it's almost like that turned into a motivation of, I'm never gonna come back to not being able to have more than I have right here. I want more than this, and I want a better life for myself, so I don't have to live or spend the rest of my life dealing with it, being in a situation like this in prison or even out of prison.
As for me, I just want to add a little bit thing in there. The problem, what some of us have, is we try to compare a prison where we come from and prison here, because I've heard people saying being in prison in UK is like you are in hotel. They're not gonna say 5-star hotel, but they say maybe 3-star hotel, because brother being say that you might gonna have a full gym, football, PlayStation, and everything. So sometimes those who are inside there, then when they're coming out, they're not telling us the story exactly what happened in there. But it doesn't matter if you have all that facilities in the prison, but you still don't have a freedom of doing your own things, friends, family, and everything. So if individual or a person thinking about himself or herself and not thinking about the family, the members of the family or the society, then this person is obviously is not the right person in the society, because instead of thinking about other people who's going to be affected for him or her to be at the prison, think about himself or herself. Okay, no problem. I'll do this because I know that I'm going to prison because life there is easy. I can get or I can do whatever I want while I'm in prison. The only thing which I'm gonna miss is just the freedom or getting together with the friends and the family. So probably selfishness for the people. They might gonna think, okay, prison is the right person. And this is we had for those who love to watch films. I think Charlie Chaplin had that kind of film that he was in prison. Then after some time, he was released. So when he was out, he was trying to do things on purpose to make sure that he was going back to prison. The reason is because he found out the life out here, it was more difficult to compare with the prison. So perception of us coming from somewhere where the prison system is completely different with the prison in here, we are thinking being prison in here is better than to be outside for some other people. So I'm not sure if that's the truth. Probably rather being said that so many things, and you might gonna come with something else, as Manny mentioned. I'll ask the question. So if we will get the question to be answered by Brother Bing, we might gonna get the right answer, thinking, yep, those who have perception that thinking the life in prison is better than outside, they are wrong.
Can I just say something? I'd like to add something there. It's something what what I'd like everyone to do who's listening, and even everybody on this platform afterwards when you go home. If you just do this, because we use this in prison. If we did all know that we were going to get stranded on a desert island tomorrow, and you don't know how long you're going to be there for, whether you're going to be saved or what, but you was given a choice of bringing one person with you and 3 items that you think would be able to help you while you're on this desert island. And when you answer that question, when you think of the one person you would like to be with you, and the free items that you would take with you on this desert island, imagine, then just think about prison. Relate it to prison, of just being taken to prison, not having the choice of having somebody with you and having the free things that you would like to, free items to bring with you. And then you will get an idea of what going to prison would be like. I just wanted to fling that in.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that is a very, very, I would say, clever way of telling people that in prison you will have very limited resources. You're not going to have everything you would like to have. And also you will have very limited interaction with other people. Maybe the loved ones will see you once in a very long while, and that in itself could be traumatizing to you if you care about your family, but also it could traumatize the family as well. They are going to be really uncomfortable. Thank you for such a valuable contribution again, Brother Bingi. Again, a question to you. Prison is known for the risk of violence and intimidation. These two aspects are very common in many, many different prisons. Would you like to maybe give us some insight in relation to that aspect, violence and intimidation in prison?
All right then. So what I would like to say is, you got different levels of prison. You've got Cat A, you've got Cat B, you got Cat C, you got Cat D. Cat D being the less prison where you're not going to really find no problems within a Cat D, because most of the people in a Cat D prison, which is an open prison, are what they call good prisoners who have shown themselves to be trustworthy, less likely to run away, and basically abide by prison rules. Then you've got Cat C, which is a semi-open prison, which is the people who they're a risk to the problem, but they need less security to hold them. Then you've got like a Cat B, which I spent most of my time in, which is like Armley Prison in Leeds. And Armley, anybody who knows Armley Prison will know that Armley has one of the baddest reputation for violence and drug-related incidents within the prison. And also, what some people fail to realize, you've got people who come to prison because of their mental state, they start self-harming. Because a lot of people do not like being banged up in a cell, 18 by 8, I think it is, room for 23 hours. So if you think about it, regardless whether you've got a TV in your cell and your bed, remember you've got a cell where you've got to eat your food, you've got your toilet where you're going to use to do what you've got to do, and also you've got one person in that cell with you, which you might not get on with them, but you've got to get on with them. They might have two different cultures. You might be completely two different people. One person might be dirtier than the other, which then can lead to violence, because a lot of the time, I think it was, from what I can remember, 60% of the incidents of violence in prison is between what they call cellmates. This is me sharing another cell with somebody else. 60% of the violence is between people who live together, who have just automatically got into a fight because they cannot get on, because you've got to live in a close environment with somebody who you probably don't like. You might have thought you did like them until you got banged up with them, and you realize that, listen, I don't like your attitude, I don't like how you're behaving, which can lead to violence. Then you've got the other issues, like you've got these postcode war thing, where you've got people who are coming into the prison who might come from different areas of Leeds or different areas of Bradford, different areas of Huddersfield, who don't get on, and know you're being put together in prison. 99% of the time, these people are going to meet at some stage, whether it's on the visits, whether it's education, whether it's work or just on a wing. That's going to lead to violence. I've seen people get hot water thrown on them, which is They boil the hot water and they put sugar in there. So when the hot water gets thrown on you, it sticks to you. That's like throwing acid in somebody's face. There's things like that. I've seen people who have walked up to somebody with what you call a bed leg, and just smash it into somebody's head and continually beat them until the officers come. That's the kind of violence. I've seen people put socks. I've seen people put pool balls in a socks and walk up to somebody and smash somebody's head in with it. Those are the kind of things. There was a guy who I knew in Lindorm. I didn't even know he was killed. He was called Jamal. It was from London. I met him briefly when I was in Lindorm, and I heard that he met up with some of his enemies in Lindorm. They stabbed him up and flung him over the balcony, which is like 30-foot balcony. He was killed in Lindorm prison, and some people forget that these are the realities of prison. So when I hear people say that prison is like a hotel, that is people glamorizing prison because they do not really want to tell it. Nobody who wants to play the tough man, the thug, the rude boy is going to go outside, or when they make a phone call, tell the friends that they're being bullied, that they're being taxed, that they're being intimidated. Everybody's going to play the Mr. Big. They're not going to tell the truth. Nobody's going to say that they've been crying in the cell because somebody's come to them and taken the trainers or the Xbox or most of the clothes. Nobody's going to tell the truth about somebody coming up to them, because these are all things what happened, and I know personally these things that happen. Will come up to you and know that you've got no vocative, you've got no strength, you've got no reputation, and come over, and every week you got to buy them things off of your canteen. You know what I'm saying? And share. These are the realities of what prison life is like, but nobody comes out and tells it. The only people who tells you about them is the people who are doing the intimidating, the bullying, the taxing. These are the only people who will probably talk about it, but nobody's going to talk about who is being a victim in prison, because nobody wants to play the role of being a victim. And there's many. My role in prison, I was a mentor. So on my wing where I was, there was none of that going on, because I used to make sure that these things never, me and two other mentors used to make sure that there was no taxing, there was no drug use, there was no drug abuse, there was no intimidating on my wing where I was at the time. And my wing was the only wing that had the less violence in the prison, because what we did, we asked for a thing what they call enabling environment, which means it's the prisoners who helped to police the wing. Because if we're going to live somewhere, we want our wing to be like a community where there's no intimidating, there's no bullying. Everybody helps everybody out. If there's somebody who's short or something, we'll help them out. We don't tax it. We don't go into people's cells. So that's all the kind of thing we had on our wing. But on the other parts of the prison, there was taxing, there was bullying, there was intimidating, and there was violence non-stop. That is the reality of prison and violence.
Thank you for painting for us a real picture of life in prison, because as Brother Omar said, some people would glorify prison as if it is a good place. But we are glad that we have first-hand experience here, and he's giving us the real picture of life in prison. Now I would like to shift our discussion on the issue of being reformed. Brother Bengi, you yourself, you went to prison and you were reformed, and you are now helping so many people in the community to go through the same. Maybe my question to you, what are the key aspects if you want to change your life after being involved in such issues and ended up in prison? How would you reform yourself?
Well, I'll tell you what, I want to touch upon what Simeon said earlier. The the first time I went to prison, I was 28 years old. I'm now 59. And out of them, the first time I went, I got 10 years. And I spent 5 years, 3 months out of that 10 years. I went in 1992, I came out 1997. 5 years, 3 months. My second time was in 2001. I got 11 and a half years for conspiracy, a big conspiracy to supply. The first time was for a shooting in Wales, which I say it was self-defense. The court said it wasn't. And the third time, which was in 2017, again, it was drug-related and gang-related, and I got 10 years. So I'm a prime example of somebody who's been to prison many times, and I can talk about the consequences of it. Number one, I have lost out. I lost altogether. I've spent 15 years, 6 months in prison, not all at once, but over a period of time. And if you work out that, my youngest child is 15 in May. My oldest is 42. I've got if I'm not wrong, Simeon will correct me. Lisa is 42, and I think Simeon is 41 this year or 40 this year. So if you take, I've lost 15 years out of my family. So, but the first two, my mindset was I didn't care about the authorities. I didn't care about working with the authorities. I thought that the authority was part of my reason in being in prison, being a Rasta young black man who grown up in the 70s in England, who went through racism. Every time I went to for a job, I got turned down or refused. So I decided, well, listen, I'm not going to sit down. My mother was a single parent. She didn't have much. She used to work every hours to go out and make money. So I thought, well, listen, I've got to do something to go out. So I was on the street from an early age doing what I had to do. And I had that mindset. I'm not going to have to ask the system for nothing. I didn't want to claim benefits. I've had many businesses over the years. I've had 2 nightclubs. I've run a clothing company. I've done promotions. I'm into the music business. I've done many things to help my kids. But this time, when I went into prison in 2017, I sat down and I thought, I put my family through a lot. Luckily for me, I've got 8 sons. None of them have been to prison. I've got 4 daughters. None of them have been to prison or been involved in crime. And I think that they looked at my situation, and that, like Simeon said, well, listen, I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm going to follow my dad's situation. Plus, I didn't hide nothing from them. I myself, I've talked to Simeon, I've talked to his brothers, and I've told them, do not make me hear you're involved in certain things, not because I'm involved in certain things. I want you to be involved in certain things. So on this particular time, I spent a lot of my time working with what they call CSIP prisoners, which is challenging support and intervention, which is the people who are the more violent prisoners. So I work with them, and I did different courses. I left school with no qualification. I've got the equivalent to 6 A levels. One of them is a 7323 training and development, which I can teach. At the moment, I'm working for St. Giles Trust, which is helping young youths, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old, who are involved in knife crime and county lines. I try to persuade them from getting involved in them kind of things. And basically, as well as getting old, I thought, you know something, I have to make sure that I give back something to my community. And not only that, I was able to see most of my kids turn out and be successful, Simeon including. None of them have been to prison. I've got 14 grandkids. The oldest is 19. None of them have been in prison. None of them have been in trouble. hopefully none of them will be will reach into the position I've been in. And I've always said to myself, I need to make sure that these parents who don't end up burying their kid, don't have to go to a hospital to look at their child on a bed, or go to prison. So I thought with somebody of my reputation, with my experience, who, if I can say it, I've got a lot of respect in the streets. So I thought, well, if I can use that respect to try to deter kids from getting involved in the wrong thing, that's what I thought. And from now until the Creator takes me, that's what I'm going to be doing, using my knowledge, my experience to deter kids from going down the road that I mean. Because I sit down sometime and I listen to the news, and when I hear another 14-year-old has stabbed another 14-year-old, or another 16-year-old has stabbed another 16-year-old, and then I hear even some elderly people who are using our youngsters to carry knives, carry drugs. When I was young and I was growing up, most of the elders would kick up our backside and tell us to go home. We couldn't get involved. I used to do the same thing. I wouldn't see youngsters around or come on what we call the front line without saying, listen, go home. I don't know if some of you remember, but our parents who used to come to me and say, listen, I've heard that my son is coming up here, my daughter's coming up onto the front line, and I don't want them to come up here. And I used to go to them, I would say, listen, your parents do not want you up here, you need to go home. You can't be coming up here. And I would make sure that they wouldn't come around where the people call the front line, where there was a lot of things going on. And this is why platforms like this, and I applaud you, and anything I can do to help a platform like this, because I think it's needed. Because when you look at our black youths, the road that they're going on right now, and if you think about it, I think they say that we make up something like 15% of the British population, the UK, but yet still we make up 25%. The ethnic minority make up 25% of the prison. It's not that we commit more crime, it's because of the situation we are in and the fact that there is a lot of injustice. We get stop and search more, we get arrested more, we get charged more, and we get the longer sentences. So this is the kind of grievance I used to have with the system. But no, I thought, well, if I can get into the system and try to change what is happening, and this is what motivates me to be part of platforms like this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, brother. We are glad to have you here, and we are very lucky to share your experience, and we are very humbled as well. And we feel more lucky that you are willing to be with us even more in the future, and we're sure that we will invite you even more so that we can voice together and try to help the community and get better. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so before we close up, I would like to give everyone a minute or two to give us their own closing remarks, starting with Brother Abdurrahman, please.
Before you get to the Brother Abdurrahman, I just want to ask him a question, because Mr. Bingi explained the situation. He missed out 15 years and 6 months, and this is
of his life,
his time he spent to the prison. So, Brother Abdurrahman, maybe you and your siblings, how did you cope? How did you feel when your dad was not present at the time?
Honestly, I don't know if you could say we coped, but it was the strength of people around us, my mother, stepmother, my siblings as well. Kind of like we stood up to fill that void, if you want to call it, which is a void that can't really be filled, because as a young boy, you need your father. You need your father around. Although my parents were separated, you still need that father. You still need that role model around. So it's not something that can be filled, the void that can be filled by anyone else other than that person. Hence the reason why we mention all the time that time is important. You know, time is one of the most important things, and it's one of the most important things that we should do in spending with our children to help them not get involved in certain situations. But it's not easy. 15 years, I never really, I know it was a lot of time, but I never really thought about it, and it was at different stages of my life as well. One was, the first one was when I wasn't even a teenager yet. Then one when I was a teenager, through my teenage life, and then one as an adult. But all of them equally have had different effects, and I've had to find different ways of dealing with it. But having a strong mother, a strong family unit overall, and people around you, it definitely helps out. It definitely helps out. But it wasn't easy.
Okay.
Thank you, brother. So now we will move on. Yusuf, do you have anything to add into our discussion?
I've got nothing to add. Basically everything that first of all, thank you, brother Bingi, and all of this this podcast today. There's so much that I've learned as well, and there's so much that I can take in with myself and for the future to help me out in my personal life just as much. And we've touched on many things on this subject, and we're still trying to look for solutions, and we're still trying to find the cause so we can deal with that cause, and hopefully, inshallah, we're able to make a difference and make a change, a positive change that will actually make the next generation much more successful in other things, and they can divert into the wrong path that is gang life and other negative situations.
Thank you, brother Yusuf. Quickly, Omar, a minute or so. Anything to close up?
Honestly, I think everything has been said, and then I do appreciate brother being part of this conversation. Actually, he taught us a lot of things based on his experience. So actually, I'm happy to have him around the platform, and he said that he's gonna be with us for more programs to come. So that's all. Just appreciate for him to be around with us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Brother Abdurrahman, anything to close up?
No, I'd just like to say again, thanks to my dad, because like I said, some of the stuff that he's mentioned, it's been a lesson for me as well. I've learned a lot, but you know, it's good to have learned experience on the platform, so that it's not just us as if you want to call it professionals or parents that just are out there telling our children not to do something. Oh, don't do this because thingy. It's good to have that person on to come on and say, look, actually, you know, I've lived it, I've seen it, and it's not actually the glitz and glamour and the road to go down. That money is temporary, but the time that you spend in prison is time that you can't get back. Your children miss out, your wife, you know, all those things that you miss out. So it's good to have somebody with learned experience on the platform and on the show. And like I said, I will. Is very happy to do stuff like this. So definitely, I will get him back on again to help benefit me and to help benefit you and the wider community, inshallah ta'ala. So jazakumullah khair.
Thank you, Brother Abdurrahman. Brother Bingi, one last word, please, from you.
I have a lot to say, you know, but we haven't got a lot of time, so I'm going to keep it short, because what I wanted to touch upon, as a black man, I think that what we have to remember is we as a black nation, we've been through a lot, and that is also part of the problem that it's not a reason for our youth to get involved in what they have got involved in, but we also have to remember that it is part of the problem. It is part of the situation, because if you think about what we have been through as Black people, but we can still stay positive. We can still, no matter where you go in the world, Black people are respected from the point that whether it be style, whether it be trend, whether it be Black people talk, or we are respected. We have people look on us, even in the fashion world. It's only the other day that I've realized that even Versace, they've stolen many things from even Kenyan tribes. If you look at the clothes that they've got, even many of the fashion world, they look to Africa for the fashion. They won't tell us, but if you look at most of the top fashioners, they look to Africa for the fashion, and they take it and they make millions from it. So this one of my greatest inspirations is Marcus Garvey, who said that we as a Black people, we have to find our own. We have to open our own banks. We have to police our own community. We have to teach our youths, educate them to make them know that the lifestyle, because the lifestyle that many of our youths are involved is not African. It's not our traditional way of lifestyle. We're not known to kill each other for over-shoppiness. That is not something that we are supposed to do. We're not supposed to envy and grudge each other. We're supposed to help and build each other. I watched your last blog and you mentioned about, you was talking about helping our youths, where it takes a village to grow one child. That's gone. We need to try to get that community back. I'm Jamaican, but I'm African. That's where my tradition, that's where my teaching, everything I look to Africa. I try to get all my teaching, all my cultural teaching from Africa. That's where we are. I see myself as African, and this is how I teach my children. Simeon will tell you, I am African because my foreparents was taken from Africa and brought to the Caribbean, and now we are here. But my tradition is Africa. So we have to look to African traditions and not Western European traditions, because that is part of the problem. And I think it was Yusuf who touched upon it last time. We need an identity. We need to get back our true identity. And from we do that, it's not going to be easy, because just me and you cannot do it. It's got to be every community in England. We've got to sit down and say, listen, we've got to work with our kids. And on top of this, before we go, is when we are trying to stop kids from getting involved in violence, you have to remember that when a kid is saying to me, I make 2,000-3,000 a week doing what I'm doing, but I want to stop. What are you going to give me in place? What can I do to replace that? We've got to find something to give back the youths, to give the youths and say, all right, then you might not make 2,000-3,000 a year, but you can set up a business where you can work towards that. And that's just that's just what I want to say. And I'll tell you the truth, I'm honored to be part of something like this, because this is what I am all about, and this is what I want to be involved in. So thank you very much. And I want to applaud the people who have set up this platform, because it's a very good platform to be a part. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if we have time for me to ask one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, Brother Bingi, after what you just said, and well, I touched on it last week, and it's a question that it's on everyone's mind, and everyone wants a solution for. But how do you beat a society, and how do you beat an enemy that's from 500 years ago? Like they've taken Western Africans, take them to the Caribbean, and that's, for me, is stealing tradition, then stealing their roots and their identity. And even to this day and age, they use a different form where it comes in technology, and they have different techniques to steal our roots and to steal our traditions and our identity. How can we give the young generation, as you said, to offer them something, because the only thing that we can offer right now, money runs the world, is values and traditional values and knowledge of who we are and where we've come from. And there's a sense of disbelief if you tell someone about the Moors, if you tell someone about certain principles that we hold, and if the youth are not listening to truth and reason, and what do we do then?
All right then. I'm straightforward, and I'll just put it down straightforward as it is. What you have to remember is, we as a black people, we are gifted. It doesn't matter if astrology, astronomy, mathematics, any area you look, like African people are gifted in every way, shape, or form. And we have youths right now, and if you was to sit down with them, even one of the baddest youths what you might know in your era, if you was to take him and for 1 minute sit down with him and discuss, you will find out that youth has got so much to offer. Yeah, we're not talking about going out, walking with knives and guns and doing other criminal things. We're talking about from a positive, and it's all the only thing what I would say is changing this. If we can change the mindset of our youths, the thinking, that's all we need to do. We don't need to do nothing else. We only need to change the mindset, because if we can change the mindset, everything else will fall into place. If we do not change the mindset set and the thinking of our youths, they're going to carry on in the same way, shape, or form that they are. So it's about changing the mindset. From my experience and me, it's just changing this. And if we can change this, everything else will fall into place.
Thank you. Unmute. Manu, unmute.
Thank you to all of our listeners, and I would like also to thank all brothers who came onto the channel today and contribute what we have discussed. And for now, I would like to say we will continue with this session next week, Saturday, 2 o'clock UK time. For those who are in East Africa, that will be 5 o'clock, and Saturday, 5 o'clock. So to summarize, we discussed about problems with gun culture in the UK, especially, and our message today is prison is not a nice place to be. It affects families. It also affects a person who is imprisoned. So we need to live our life accordingly. We need to understand our identity, and we need to have the right kind of mindset. We Black people, we have ability, we have a lot of opportunity, but even though it needs us to struggle, to fight, let's fight for it so that we make our lives better. Thank you for coming into our session. We will see you again next week.
Thank you.